Hello everybody, my name's James, and for the benefit of those listening to the podcast version, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream, where I welcome questions from the YouTube community, which this week I'm bringing to you on a Tuesday, because Suj is largely quite busy today, and that also gives us the opportunity on Friday to reassess the situation after the FA Cup replays, and we'll also do a review for you of the Crystal Palace, Manchester United and Manchester City Tottenham games. Nothing overly to update you on since yesterday's podcast, so I'll get straight into the questions. And I can see FPL Crusader is starting with one that I kind of covered yesterday. Mitoma or March? Quite simply is the question. I said yesterday, small preference for Solly March. What I meant to say on the podcast yesterday that I didn't was, I guess there's a little bit of Miguel Almiron vibes about it. Truly horrendous record, really, in terms of long-term goal scoring per appearance, and yet suddenly found some form. And Almiron was one that I've not owned Almiron this season, and I obviously regret overlooking it. You just think can't continue, doesn't do it. And we've had that in the past with Jesse Lingard, Ilkay Gundogan. You're like, these players just don't go off and they have little spells. And Solly March might be in the middle of one. Mitoma's a super player. I'm not sure it's going to equate to attacking returns as yet. That's my opinion. But I think March could just as quickly dry up and not return for another 3 months, potentially. As a reminder, Sam Murray, FPL Seagulls, part of our Clash of Correspondence this Thursday. So I'll be posing a lot of potential FPL questions to Sam about Brighton assets. He will answer it better than I will. FPL Crusader also says, will Rodrigo be less effective with the return of Bamford and arrival of Rutter? So Jorginho Rutter, whose name was escaping me on the podcast yesterday, has been bought from Hoffenheim. Club record fee reported around about £40 million. And the honest answer is yes, he probably will. But how quickly, I don't know. So I'm going to have a look at Rutter because I don't know anything about the player. A, for myself, and also B, for our advanced tier patrons as part of a Talking Tactics on Friday to kind of introduce what my findings are about the player. I suspect he probably won't be thrown straight in. And I suspect it's probably similar with Bamford. So look, I'm a Rodrigo owner myself. My current thinking is I'll have him this week. That's fine. There's a potential double in 22. And if there's not, it's not in the Forest away, which is a tough fixture. Forest haven't lost at home since September, but it's still a reasonable fixture for an attacking asset. And then I intend to use one of the 2 transfers that I'm likely to have in game week 23 then as Rodrigo to Odegaard. Oh, well, mind you, I might use 2 in game week 22 itself, actually. But yeah, Rodrigo to Odegaard, I need to open up for game week 23. Should something happen to Rodrigo this week where I've got doubts about it, then I move to Odegaard in 22. And I guess if Leeds double doesn't happen in 22, I'll just cut my losses then and move to Odegaard in 22 with Arsenal have got Everton ahead of then their own double in 23. Lamici says, hi James, early self-inflicted benching headache with 8 good attackers. Who to bench out of? Mitrovic, home to Tottenham. Wouldn't want to do that at the moment, mate. Almiron away to Palace. Yeah. Grealish, home to Wolves. Rashford away to Arsenal. Martinelli at home to United. Definitely wouldn't bench Mitrovic. He'd be first choice out of all 5 of them, I think, at the moment. And yes, there might be a bit of personal bias in there. Rashford and Martinelli, I've got no intention to bench either. And I've got the conflicting where I've got Ben White and De Gea and may bench those 2. So I'm on an all-in strategy. Grealish versus Almiron. I just didn't even realise what I'd done there. Grealish versus Almiron. That makes me just want to pick Almiron by itself. I guess it depends on how you feel on Friday. If you think Grealish is going to play against Wolves or not. It's almost impossible to answer at this minute. But I guess if I had to lock it in now, it's probably bench Grealish. FPL Crusader says, I have taken a punt on Alex Moreno and left Shaw and White on my bench for game week 21. Good night from down under. All right. Nicely done, mate. Moreno certainly will cover you up nicely for game week 25 and 28. The Everton and Bournemouth fixtures in blanks we know are going to go ahead. That said, what we don't know at the moment is the extent of Luca Dean's injury. I suspect that's dislocated shoulder from the victory against Leeds on Friday, but I haven't seen the prognosis as yet. Depends how long he's out, right? If he's out for 2 months, you're good to go there, I think. If he's going to be back in a couple of weeks, don't know what that means, but good luck. Dread FPL, hello my friend, says, hi James, hope you're well mate. Yeah, all good, thanks pal. Says, which defender to play, White, Shaw or transfer in Aki? Cheers. See, this is the thing, right? I think they're both reasonable plays. A little bit, I mentioned this yesterday, a little bit like I could foresee the picture where Newcastle potentially got a 0-0 draw at Arsenal. I think that could be the same at the weekend. It's difficult to look beyond Arsenal at the moment. But I don't think a draw for Arsenal in the circumstances is a bad result. A defeat might put some doubt suddenly into their minds, for example, and it will certainly give United a feeling of they're in it, right? So I think a draw is okay for Arsenal. And they won't want to lose. They definitely won't want to lose. And I suspect United will also view the game and go, although they'll be thinking probably to win the title, they've probably got to go there and win. But also, realistically, a draw there is a good result in terms of their progress. I guess it depends a little bit, Dredd. It's a little bit like with myself. I said currently I'm probably looking at benching White and De Gea. Not because I think necessarily Ward and Botman are better assets this coming weekend. It's just a case of if I go that way, I'm more likely to get 11 returns. Now, Arsenal United could finish 2-2. Ben White could assist a goal and De Gea could save a penalty and Martinelli and Rashford could score and everybody returns. But let's be honest, that's quite unlikely. Whereas I go in and I go, right, I don't fancy Ward against Brighton, but okay, differential this weekend because most won't want to play him. Although I suppose those who've got Kepa have probably got a dilemma this week with Kepa going to Liverpool. Botman, of course, is the potential for the double clean sheet for Newcastle at Palace. I obviously own Kieran Trippier, as many of you will do, and that certainly acts as a little bit of a differential that can potentially boost up my returns in terms of Newcastle defenders. But I'm only leaning that way because the all-in strategy. I think like if you haven't got, and I'm going to guess you do, if I didn't own any Arsenal United defensive players, I'd probably play White and Shaw in your case. I would guess that Shaw will go back to left back. I know he did really well again at centre back at the weekend, but I'd presume that Martinez will come back in, I think. That would be my take. So you've got a little bit extra potential there for an attacking return. Not that I overly think Luke Shaw is going to post high offensive numbers. So it probably depends how you feel, mate. Do you want to go for that kind of all-in strategy or not? And if you don't play them, who do you bench? So you're saying one or the other, which one do you play? I'd lean for White with the home game, with what you've got. You could buy Nathan Ake, and he might not play. Is the reality. I think I'd ask yourself, Dredd, if you're going for Ake, are you comfortable with that for game week 23? Obviously, for their potential double against Villa and Arsenal. So I can see the interest. I think, to be honest, the best thing to do is roll this week. As I spoke about at length yesterday. Any doubts this week? This is a great week to roll. There's so many things we'll learn between 21 and 22. We'll learn the Carabao Cup final and how that impacts game week 25. We'll know who's through in the FA Cup. We'll know the draw for the 5th round. Then we'll know the probability of the 8 quarter-finalists for game week 28 and what blanks that's likely to incur. Obviously, when game week 22 starts this February, transfer window is shut. The amnesty for suspensions will be over. We can get information on injuries from all the cup games. If you take Manchester United, for example, United have got 3 cup games in between 21 and 22. You've got players potentially going to pick up injuries, etc. So it's a brilliant week to roll. Any doubts on that, I can't advise making a transfer. So for me, Dredd, I'd play Ben White from that. Daniel Evans says, who do you think will be in the bottom 3 this season? Bournemouth and Everton. And I think the last place is up for grabs. And still favour Southampton at the moment. They've had a very, very good week. But the next few fixtures, Villa, Brentford, Wolves that are coming up for them are particularly important. So I think at the moment, yeah, probably still Southampton. I think they do need to get a forward in probably before the transfer window closes. I think most Saints fans would probably agree with that. I just edge for them at the moment. I think Nottingham Forest, we spoke about this I think last midweek maybe, whenever we did the game week 19 review. And we looked at their fixture and we said, look, from the next 3, they could pick up 7. They've got 3 against Leicester. Next to a Bournemouth away, Leeds at home. They'll be thinking they can win both those games. If they get another 6 points, they're going to be clear. And they do have quite a bad run of fixtures after that. But that's going to put them in a strong position. And I think they've got a settled team now. And I fancy them to pull away. Wolves look like they're getting better under Lopetegui. I do think, despite the fact they're in a shitter, I think West Ham will get out of it. I don't think anybody really thinks West Ham will go down. Leeds, I think, will be all right. They've got enough good offensive players, which gives them a chance of winning any game at any time, although defensively they are horrendous. If Leicester can't get James Maddison fit, and they were to lose Harvey Barnes suddenly, then offensively they're ropey to go with an average defence and a declining midfield. I would be amazed if they went down, but I'd almost put them more likely than say West Ham at the moment, ironically. So I think it will be those 3. I can't really see... Palace are worth keeping an eye on because they've got a horrendous fixture list. We've covered this several times. They basically don't have a good fixture till April. But then if they do get sucked in, they've got an amazing run in where you'd fancy them to get themselves back out of trouble, I think. So, yeah, Bournemouth and Everton for me. Bournemouth are on the slide. Everton, spoke about it a lot yesterday. I think still Southampton at the moment. JP says, stupid Dean owner here. Who should I target to get in? Got Tripp, White, Shaw, Stones already. Look, it's dull and boring, right? But with that back line, I would say to you, they're all decent. You want cover. You want cover kind of really for John Stones if he gets left out. We don't know the injury prognosis at the moment, obviously. But if you had to play Trippier, White, Shaw every week, that's absolutely fine. So you're looking for an enabler, you're looking for something cheap. So I think you're either Hugo Bueno or if you want to stay within Villa, personally, I'd rather take a chance on Tyrone Mings that's slightly cheaper than Moreno at the moment, unless Luca Dean's ruled out for a prolonged period. If, like I said earlier, he's ruled out for, say, 2 months, then I don't mind Alex Moreno as a direct replacement. JP says, do you think it's time to sell Andreas/Almiron? If so, to who? I have Rodrigo, Rashford, KDB also. No, so I think, look, Pereira does the job on the tin. And is when you look around and you've got March, Mitoma, players like this doing really well, there's an instinct of, should I move it? The reality is, for me, he's still absolutely ideal as like an 8th attacking player, basically. He covers game week 25 quite nicely at the moment, Wolves at home, so I wouldn't stress about that. On Almiron, Newcastle's next 3 are good. Palace, West Ham, Bournemouth. If you get to the end of that and the returns aren't coming back, bin. But at the moment, I'd be holding on to Almiron. I wouldn't be selling. Sean says, roll ahead of game week 21 unless there are big fires to put out? Question. I'm not loving my team right now, but it feels like the potential info between 21 and 22 will be vital. Yeah, absolutely, Sean. As covered, I really think that's what the majority of people should do this week. Now, if your team's got problems and you need to fix it, of course. And there'll be a number you perhaps even rolled last week, for example. Cool, no problem. But I think this is a really, really strong week to roll. There are so many reasons. Probably this week I feel there's more information, I think, to gain between 21 and 22 than there will be any other week this season, I think. In terms of learning the fate of both cup competitions and the transfer window closing. I mean, those are 3 very good reasons in themselves. So, yeah, I strongly think roll, Sean, if you can. FPL Andy says, afternoon, James. Hello, hope you're well, mate. And another Andy is in, my good friend. Let's talk FPL. Andy Mears in says, James, please tell me my triple up on Man United will all play twice in game week 22. Well, I can't do that. What I can tell you is my confidence since the chip strategy pod on it has increased a little. I'll repeat what I said yesterday in case you haven't seen or heard yesterday's podcast, that I don't think we'll have an announcement this week. I think what might change that, if Leeds lose to Cardiff tomorrow, that might change it. I thought Thursday would be the earliest we'd hear anything because they'd wait for the Leeds Cup game to go. I think if Leeds lose, they might take the chance to provisionally announce Man United Leeds into the midweek of 22. I think it's more likely that Leeds will go through and they'll make an announcement probably on the Sunday if it's going to happen. on the Sunday of the FA Cup fourth round weekend. Both teams are scheduled to play on the Saturday, and United play at 8 o'clock at night. So it wouldn't be the Saturday night; it would be the Sunday. I'm leaning into it happening. I think what stops it is, of course, the police. It's not a good look that they're going to play each other twice in a row, because obviously the two teams meet in 23. But it's the fact that Brentford put a statement out last week that people got excited about, and all they were doing was basically they were putting the tickets on sale for away fans for the scheduled 25 fixture, and they were just making it clear to them that the scheduled date could move. And it just made me think that because they kind of come out and announced that if it was coming forward, I know people thought, oh, maybe it's coming forward. I actually thought it was less. I think they might have come out and said there's a chance it could get brought forward or get pushed back. They didn't. And it's that's made me think a little bit more that it won't be Brentford. Now, to sit here and go, oh, I'm 100% it's going to be United Leeds in 22. No, I can't do that. I wouldn't even like to put a percentage on it. But I think we can all be aware of the possibility. And I think, look, in any case, United have got Palace at home in 22. It's a great fixture. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Simple as that. But I'm leaning into, probably United and Leeds. I think it's probable. Andy also says, but in all seriousness, hope you're good and thanks again for the Chip Strategy pod. You're very welcome, mate. That Chip Strategy podcast from last Thursday, which thank you to everybody who's fed back on it, and I still see people quote tweeting it now. It's nice for us and makes a change, because obviously we do so much in terms of content. Shit goes out of date quite quickly. This didn't. And it's still all relevant. There's not a lot from that podcast over the course of the 5 days since that's changed. So if you want that Chip Strategy podcast, it's basically all still the same. From tonight, depending on the Liverpool result, it begins to the pattern begins to change a little bit. Yeah, it is tonight Liverpool play, isn't it? Andy, while you're there, by the way, I saw you posted, I think yesterday or the day before, you reposted on Twitter your first ever video. And I watched a bit of it, and it's amazing to see how far you've come, mate. You are a hero in this community, mate. FPL Benchwarmer says, how do all the rescheduling considerations rank in terms of importance, i.e. TV rights, police concerns, UCL clashes, playing same team twice in a row, 7 days notice, etc.? Okay, it's a great question. To be honest, police concerns are probably the least, but I think in the United Leeds case, it obviously matters more than it did for the Palace United arrangement, for example. In terms of TV rights, the fixture was, when it was announced, Sky weren't originally going to show the game. I actually had this conversation with Ian Parrin, who I referenced in the strategy pod at Planet It Sky on Twitter. He was having a conversation on it was either on Twitter or on our Slack about that. I thought that if Leeds and Cardiff was the ITV game and FA Cup FA Cup third round replay, and it was on ITV4, then Sky would show United game in 21 if it happened. But he'd said, and quite rightly at the time, the BBC had announced that they were going to show their FA Cup replay on the Wednesday on BBC One. Now, obviously, we now know Wolves Liverpool is tonight. And that then opened up the possibility where I said, if it's like Leeds Cardiff and it's on ITV4 are not going to be bothered if Sky show Palace United, and that's what's happened. So the original arrangement of Palace United didn't take into factor of TV at all, nothing to do with it. Sky then picked it up once they realised that they could. UCL clashes is important, right? So it goes without saying, Liverpool and against Chelsea is not going to be rearranged for Champions League night. It can't. It cannot possibly happen unless it's later in the season and they're both out. And that's because they play on alternate weeks across the last 16 stage. So that can't go in there. Whereas Liverpool versus Wolves can go into game week 26 when Liverpool have a free midweek. That's after they play Manchester United. And I've said I think that fixture will go in there, but it's less likely, by the way, if Liverpool lose tonight. The day's notice is a big bugbearer for me. You know this, I've spoken about it a lot in terms of notification for fans. I think it's a piss take they've just shown they can take the piss out of Palace United, so I think they'll probably take the piss out of United and Leeds at short notice. When they just generally should be making the announcement now and saying if this happens, this is what's happening, and fans will get it, but they're too scared of. It comes across as we think United will beat Reading and all this kind of shit. Just do it for the sake of fans, but they won't do it. They won't do it because of that, I don't think. So there's a lot at play, and how you mark that down is important. Once we get, I was going to say it's important. It can't really be determined later in the season when you got the spare midweeks like game week 29. Sky/BT will have a real say on what games they want to show. Will obviously impact the nights that games are on what might go where. So, for example, I think Villa Burnley ended up being 37 rather than, I want to say, maybe 34 last year. I might have that wrong. Because they decided to win to show Burnley Southampton on the Thursday night. And that's why that happened. So at that stage, the TV companies had a bit more of a say. The answer is, Benchwarmers, there isn't a science to it. There isn't a science to it. I guess the overall judge is the Premier League. Nothing will get arranged without the Premier League giving it the green tick, if you will. Jordan Williams says, as a Leeds fan, I'm not feeling confident at all. Can you say something to make me feel better about the rest of our season? In all seriousness, thanks for the amazing content. Keep up the great work. You're very welcome, Jordan. I'll repeat again what I said on the podcast yesterday. I think sacking Jesse Marsch could be. Let's not say it would be. I think it would be a really, really big mistake at the moment. I know there's a lot of Leeds fans really unhappy with him. I think he was on a hiding to nothing following Bielsa. He would be advised, admittedly, to stop making references to what he inherited, because then it gets Leeds fans' backs up about referencing Bielsa's team for and stuff like that. He should stop doing that. He should just focus on now. But I see a team with desire, commitment. I've only seen them once where I thought, you're really flat, and that was when they lost at Leicester. Who I think offensively can damage anyone. They'll have bad days, they'll have good days. The results aren't good enough, like 2 wins in 18 or whatever. I mean, to be honest, that's enough to get someone sacked. But I see progress. I see that he inherited... That's not true. He ended up in a situation where he obviously lost his 2 best players in the summer, in Rafinha and Calvin Phillips. And Calvin Phillips needed 2 players in Adams and Rocker to replace the 1 player. Rafinha was obviously going to be a massive loss. And what they've added there is a sprinkling of younger players like Sinistera, Anonto. Somerville's progressed this year. So, I think there were problems in the summer. And because he had to fix the Phillips and Rafinha problem, he couldn't fix the other real problem, which is defensively he shipped too many goals. And the reality is, although he shouldn't say it, he has inherited that. He inherited, and it's to Bielsa's credit that Leeds were so fun to watch, because a lot of his team were not Premier League quality. There were players still in that Leeds team in the backline who are not Premier League quality, in my opinion. Who, if they come out the team, another Premier League club's not buying them. So that needs working on the summer. So I think Leeds have got to get to the summer and obviously get enough points. And I'm pretty sure that they will, by the way. Then they've got to really focus on the summer and the window. I think obviously they've spent this money on Jorginho Rutter up front, which I understand because of Bamford's injuries. And I know Leeds fans kind of, when Rodrigo plays as a 9, they want him to play as a 10. When he plays as a 10, they kind of want him to play as a 9. He's kind of neither nor one nor the other, and I get that. So if Rutter's going to be the answer and score the goals, that solves the problem. But I would rather they'd have spent that money on defensive reinforcement. But honestly, Jordan, I think you'd be fine. I really do. You watched the game Friday, right? Good. Shouldn't have lost the game, mate. Gareth James says, hi James, do you think Perisic has now lost appeal at Spurs, and would you transfer out? Thanks for the content as always, and bloody upvote people. I think what Gareth's saying is, for those in the stream, hit the like button please, it's always appreciated. To be honest with you, there isn't a Spurs fan anywhere that would have predicted Perisic not to start on Sunday, and it staggered me. And it staggers me on reflection even more than it did at the time. Because when I saw the team, I thought, wow, Sessegnon has had some decent duels, like with Salah in the past, where he's done quite well. But Perisic wasn't the big problem when we lost at the Emirates. And you suddenly, if you do that, you're making Saka think about going the other way rather than just drawing him onto you, which you could do because they weren't worried about Sessegnon. Perisic, you've got to stop the delivery because his delivery's outstanding, and also Tottenham can play diagonals and aim for him aerially and stuff, and he's great in the air. If he wins the header, he's probably challenging against White. So if Perisic wins the header, he's then in behind. Not necessarily for himself, but he can run off for the 1-2 and stuff. So, I mean, I said yesterday it might be Perisic and Emerson at Man City now. I wouldn't be surprised. Although the Doherty didn't do anything wrong on Sunday. His performance was what it typically is. Okay. I wouldn't say he's playing badly at the moment. He deserves to play at the moment, Doherty, from the choices we've got. Would I sell? Fulham away and Man City at home next, mate. Probably yes. I warned in terms of buying Tottenham defensive players that you should want them in for the attacking, and you surely weren't expecting a clean sheet against Arsenal and Man City. So I think it is value. If Doherty had been left out, I'd have probably been more like wait and see. At Perisic's value, like I genuinely thought he was completely safe. And it might be that because Sessegnon was shite, that Perisic will come back in and play all the games. I'd roll this week. Put it that way. I wouldn't sell him this week. I'd take another 2 games of information. It's not a huge problem. I think if you got him, you just stick him in the team at Fulham and keep your fingers crossed. Cameron Wright says, hi James, what do you think the strategy is this week on those with triple United and triple Arsenal if United don't get the double? Not to panic, because both teams have got brilliant 22 fixtures. Arsenal go to Everton, United have got Palace at home, so it's not to panic. It's definitely keep the Arsenal players, isn't it? And like I said, I don't think you're going to know this week, so you definitely keep for 22. And then depending on probably where you're at with value and stuff, United, you start thinking about what you're doing ahead of 25 if they reach the Carabao Cup final. And that's also influenced by what Newcastle players you have, who are probably, bar Trippier, probably going to be easier to sell when you hit 25, when you hit 24 either way, because they've got Liverpool, then blank or Brighton, and then Man City. So there's suddenly a tougher run of fixtures. It's worth saying Newcastle's fixture against Nottingham Forest in 28 is obviously confirmed, and you have to bear that in mind as well. But I think it's not a panic. The Arsenal assets you keep. You run through. Particularly if they lose to City in the Cup as well. Then you've got them covered for 25, 28 as well. So, yeah, I think with the Arsenal assets, it's not necessarily this week, but beyond this week, is get you free by no later than 23 and probably ideally 22. You get your, but say for me, if Rodrigo does have a double, I'm sticking, aren't I? You get your free and you stick with it. And my intention is to add Odegaard to Martinelli and White, and I think that's fine. And obviously there'll be weeks where Saka goes off and the others don't. I'm sure there'll be weeks where that goes the other way and stuff. I think just get your free, stick with it, and go. Cole says, Sky Fantasy question. With the news today about Stones, Diaz, KDB, I'm starting to think my move to 6-man City was a mistake, hoping for the best. I haven't seen the news, Cole. To tell you the truth. You've caught me very much on the hop, so I've not seen the news. I really can't answer that at this stage, but I am going to see if I can get some news on that. Man City. Let's see what my guys on Patreon are saying. Kevin De Bruyne is absent from Man City training today, as per Sky Sports News. Okay. I haven't seen updates on Stones, Diaz. I've only got De Bruyne from the free, mate. To be honest, if De Bruyne is a problem for me, I just go straight to Kane, mate, in Sky. So, yeah, look, in regrets, mate, it is what it is. City's done. There's no point regretting it. I'd go back and do it again. I wouldn't have bothered. I'd have gone heavy on Newcastle, to tell you the truth, on overhaul, but there you go. Noam Jacoby says, hi James, thanks for your help. Game week 25 fault. United, Newcastle, Brentford, Brighton are all performing and got the fixtures. Is limiting ownership worth the sacrifice? Well, it's dependent, isn't it? I'd spoke about this on the chip strategy pod. It's probably a little bit dependent on what's on your bench, mate. So if your bench is Greenwood and someone else who's not, Nico Williams, you've got a problem, haven't you? You got a real problem going into that game week. So you wanna be looking at your bench now and thinking, and it's not this week. It's take the information this week, which we'll have next week, and go, what can I do with my bench to cover me 25, so I don't need to sell too many of these players. And the problem with the Brighton assets is they're enablers, right? Dunk, Estupinan, March, Mitoma, even Evan Ferguson up front. They're all players who to be honest, they're never like, I'm playing them every week. They're a choice dependent on fixture and what other fixtures other teams have. So the likes of them could easily be your bench players. So that's not going to help. That's not going to work. I don't think that you should be diving into Brighton this week, personally. It's genuinely my take. I've got to get March or Mitoma. Or, like, if you've got 2 free transfers, brilliant, get one. Cool. If you've not got a lot of United Newcastle, get one. Brilliant. Cool. But for most people, it's going to be wait. And it might be the situation is that Newcastle go out the cup and I'm walking into Brighton home to Bournemouth in 22. Suddenly they've got an announcement of a double game week maybe. And I'm going, yeah, fuck, got to get them. Great. So I really think you can give yourself a headache thinking about these sort of things too much this week. Realistically, with the prospect of the 22 double, you're not selling United. With the Newcastle fixtures in the next 3, you're not selling Newcastle. If you've already got Brighton, you're definitely not selling them. And if you've got Tony, you're definitely not selling him with the next 2. So, but Tony, for example, after the next 2, then he goes to Arsenal in 23. You might deem, okay, I jump back to Mitrovic now. He's got Forest at home, for example. It's just an example transfer. So, at the moment, you're not selling anything this week. You're gathering the information. Would I go in and buy new this week? If you're not buying United new this week for Arsenal, away, I don't think. Again, I'd take the information. If I want to add a third next week, I will. Newcastle, do I deem it essential to buy a Newcastle player this week on top of whatever anyone's got? No. And it's the same with Brighton and Brentford. So, keep your powder dry. We'll know where we sit next week. You are right. Yes, there is a little bit, but there's different stages you can come off. So if you look ahead, like I said, if you've got Tony, 23, come off. Arsenal away, then Palace at home, then blank. It's enough to say there's going to be something better. Mitrovic has got Forest, Brighton, Wolves. 2 home games in that period. Decent. Newcastle, you start coming off 24. So you're mapping it out and you've got your spares. So you don't have to use 10, 22 and 22 if you roll. Use 1 and roll again. And start fixing your problem as close. It's a really good strategy now to start thinking about rolling to when you have to use the 2. Louis says, hi James, with Man City playing twice before Arsenal play again, do you think that will make a significant difference to the title race? Well, look, I expect that when Arsenal kick off against Manchester United, that City will only be 2 points behind. But then they'll have played, how many more is it? So 2 more? So I don't think Arsenal should stress about that. They'll probably feel it on their neck a little bit, but I mean, I wouldn't even guarantee City beating Tottenham and Wolves, to be honest. So I'm as confident of Tottenham getting signed on Thursday as I was going into the Arsenal game. And I say that despite the fact I predicted a draw, because what I did say on our differential show on Patreon is I think we'll get a draw as long as Bentancur plays. As soon as Bentancur, and I said on that pod, so if Bentancur don't play, we're fucked. And that's how it proved. Hopefully he's going to be back on Thursday. That would make a really big difference to us. If Bentancur's not back Thursday, we won't get anything at City. It's the same thing. John Cale says, afternoon James, what's your thoughts on Leeds? Thought they looked good against Villa, but them not taking chance of putting pressure on Marsh. Thanks for the question, John. I've obviously covered it for someone else. I'm going to skip that because I think I'd be repeating myself, but thank you for the question. Garav says, hi James, by which game which you think the title will be wrapped up? You asked me that in the questions for the podcast, or at least someone else did, and I know that because I covered it in the unanswered queues on Patreon yesterday, and I said game week 35 or 36. Jerry Dharma U says, hi James, thoughts on Kane captain versus Fulham if Haaland plays 90 versus Spurs? I've currently got it bust on Kane as vice captain. Despite where we're at, and Fulham do look like they're improving defensively, I don't think it's a bad fixture for him. I say it all the time, away from home is just as good for Kane as home. So you just literally judging it on the opponent. I've no thoughts not to captain Haaland. Next midweek, they haven't got a fixture now, have they? So there's time for a rest afterwards, so I don't see why he wouldn't. I don't see why he wouldn't play unless he had a problem from the Tottenham game. So I'll be captain Haaland in 21. I would happily take Haaland getting injured in minute 1. The only thing is, I say that, he might actually make Man City more difficult to play against. Jerry Dharma says, that's a question I've done, sorry. Garav also says, hi James, who's your player of the season so far? I think, to be honest with you, because of the sheer volume of goals, probably Haaland. But I think Odegaard and Saka would be right up there, really, really pushing that close. I think. So I think, and Trips is absolutely. I know that's we focus on it from a fantasy perspective, but just generally anyway, he's had a brilliant season. I'd be interested to know Newcastle players would vote their player of the year, but I'm gonna guess Trips would be right up there. Beyond that. I think Casemiro's made a huge impact on United, but I wouldn't say player of the year for all teams. So yeah, I think Haaland ahead of Saka and Odegaard for me, I think. JA says, hi James, have you ever been through a season without taking any points hits? If not, what was the lowest number of hits taken? I mean, I don't remember my shit historically, mate, but I would be surprised if I didn't. Like, I don't keep a track of what I've done in previous seasons, and to be honest, I can barely remember who I bought into my team 2 weeks ago. I don't. Once something's done, I have a very good memory of football. But in terms of FPL, once it's done, it's done. Like people always say, "What's your greatest FPL moment?" And I'm always like, I don't know. Guerrero's 5 goals against Newcastle, maybe. I generally, it's these sort of things. I just don't remember. I can't even remember most seasons who I triple captained. Who did I triple captain last season? Salah, 36. But he doesn't. These things don't come to me instantly. Jim says, hi James, what do you think West Ham should do with Moyes? And he's going for Rafa Benitez, just a further sign that the West Ham board have no imagination or clue. It's an interesting one because I think most West Ham fans have completely run out of patience with Moyes, and I get it. Football's not great. The league position for them is completely unacceptable. Whereas I think with Jesse Marsh, most of us would have, in pre-season, would have gone, yeah, they'll be in trouble again. And they stayed up like at the death in Gameweek 38, didn't they? So West Ham's decline with the players they've got as well has obviously been unacceptable. But I don't for a minute think that they'll go down, despite currently being in the bottom 3. Like I think they're a sort of team that can comfortably just get 3 wins in a row at some point and they're done. Whereas I don't think the others down there are capable of putting those back-to-back results together in quite such the same way. I don't think Benitez's appointment would go down well. Really don't. You have to, I mean, his last job was with Everton, and there's probably an interesting note on that as well, is that Benitez has obviously been a brilliant manager and was obviously particularly good at Liverpool. And obviously had a very good spell at Newcastle. No, Newcastle fans loved him. But the game has changed. The game has changed a lot. And maybe from that perspective, it's passed him by a little bit from that point. So, no, I don't think that would be a good appointment at all. I think my take at the moment would be certainly stick for the weekend and then see how you feel afterwards. But, I mean, if they get beat, he's done, isn't he? I think. I don't know. I don't think Benitez makes that better necessarily. He might have a short-term uplift. Is Benitez going to take West Ham to where they want? I don't see it, mate. I don't see it. And for a club like West Ham, you're trying to match up the ambitions of the club and also just get the immediate situation fixed. Benitez probably fixed the immediate situation. Does he give West Ham the football that they want and stuff like that with the players they bought like Paquetá and Schumacher? Nope. So I wouldn't be big on that. Callum Costello says, hi James, who do you think will finish top 4 this season? I hope you're doing well. I think like most people, the current top 4, and I would even say probably I was going to say the order they're in, but I'm not even sure what order they're in. But I would say, yeah, Arsenal, City, United, Newcastle would be the order. I think most people would agree with that at the moment. Craig Robbins wants to call me a legend. Thanks, mate. Hendrik says, what we think of Spurs. Well, that's good, mate. I mean, look, I covered Spurs a lot yesterday, and we'll do on tomorrow's Patreon podcast in mass detail. So, bit shit at the moment. We can skip that. Ellie says, thoughts on Morgan Gibbs-White? Yeah, interesting. I spoke about him and Brennan Johnson quite a bit on the podcast yesterday. Couple of decent fixtures. I think what I described it, and it was the same when I referenced James Ward-Prowse on this as well, was if you really are looking for something short-term differential, I don't mind it. I think to buy a player like that now, you have to have 2 free transfers and the luxury, because I don't think it's worth going in and losing the extra transfer potentially for 22. That would be my take. Ben says, hi James, do you think we navigate bringing in the Brighton players but also being careful of the potential blank game at 25? Yeah, I think I've kind of partly covered that, Ben, so I'm going to skip that, but thank you very much for the question, mate. Glenn says, afternoon James, cheers for the content, you must sleep less than me. Don't worry about me, mate. FPL Richie says, hi James, lovely to join you this lunchtime. I'd be fascinated for your view on the Moyes situation at West Ham. 5 wins since start of 2022. Is that 5? Fucking hell. I'm not sure that can't be right. 5 wins in 2022. That literally can't be right, mate. Can't be. There's no way West Ham have only won, and I'm going to say, assume you mean league games. West Ham can't have only won 5 league games in 2022. Come back to me, Richie, and at me later with like the 2022 league table and transfer market or something. Otherwise, I think I've covered that. Mark B says, afternoon top man, is it a no-brainer to switch Miggy to one of the Brighton assets? Yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's a don't do it. Roll transfer, mate. Honestly, I know people don't want to hear that because it's trigger happy and stuff, as people want to be, but they've got Palace away and they're awful at the moment. Just leave it be for the second. Just a dad posting stuff says, hi James, give Kulusevski one more week, we'll be starting him or jumped on Odegaard, feels like rolling this week is sensible. Yeah, again, you've got it. I get that someone like Odegaard's really desirable at the moment, but he's back playing Kulusevski, and if he's fit, he'll start at Fulham. He's too important to the team. So yeah, it's a role, and then you feel better when you get to 22. He's got Man City, Odegaard's got Everton. That's the right play, and there is a case to say, but if you know you're going to make that transfer, just make it now. It's not as clear, and the information might then deem that. I'd say to you that what happens if you feel you get stuck with Kulusevski? Say in between 21, 22, just you pick up 3-4 injuries. Is it the end of the world if you stick with him? Nah, he's like the previous one with Almiron. Okay, if you got 2 free transfers and the luxury to move it to a Brighton player, fine. If you only got 1 free transfer, I think really waiting. Is Brighton away to Leicester that much better than Newcastle away to Palace? And Newcastle are good. Good. We don't know the impact of Gumez injury, admittedly, on Newcastle. So information again. I'd roll. Andrew Grundy says, hey James, who would you bench for Mitrovic, Rodrigo and Mitoma? Just back the guys at home. I would pick Rodrigo over Mitoma. Yeah. FPL Richie says, second question, can Cancelo owners chance holding now for the Wolves game, good week to roll, etc.? Exactly that, mate. Exactly that. I'm a Cancelo owner, and to be honest with you, unless he gets injured tomorrow night, and I know that he's probably out of game week 22. I'm not bothered about 21. Just play White or whatever, right? Unless I know he's out of 22, he's going out for a while, then he's staying. Mainly Deep says, start Ward or Kepa. Cheers, James. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. I didn't really answer it properly. That a few would probably have that dilemma this week. God, tough. And I think the reason it's tough is you can't foresee a clean sheet in either. But if either gets it could be a haul. It could be a haul. And then I think I start stripping that back and I go, what's more likely? Chelsea to win 1-0 at Anfield or Leicester to beat Brighton 1-0? And I think as much as I've praised Brighton, it's more likely that Leicester win 1-0, I think. So I would probably say play Ward would be my take. But it's close. Like if someone's got a preference the other way on that, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Alex Mitchell says, I have Kane, Mitrovic, Robbo. Good for you, mate. Joseph Robinson says, Jim, would not surprise me. Moyes and Lampard sacked and swap jobs. West Ham won't appoint Lampard, mate. No, Everton might appoint Moyes. Addy Tor says, hi James, you think there's trouble now at West Ham at the moment? That, honestly, you can say, oh, he played for them. That won't go down well, mate, I promise you. Addy Tor says, hi James, you surprised Chelsea didn't bid for Trossard instead of buying Mudryk? To be honest, I'm just surprised they didn't just bid for Trossard and Wilfred Gnonto as well as buying Mudryk. Stavros says, greetings James from sunny Cyprus. Who to bench from Cucurella, Shaw and White will bank the transfer this week? I think, look, doubts about his potential start and Liverpool away. That's quite straightforward. It's Cucurella, isn't it? Jane Max says, hi James, with half the season now gone, I'm constantly treading water, unable to make sustained gains. At what point do we really have to take risks to move up in ranks, being the same rank for 5 weeks? I guess it probably comes down to like, how risky are you as a manager? So it's worth saying I'm not so much. I don't mind following. I was going to say follow the template. I would say I follow the template so much. But I would say I'm probably not a risky manager. Let me put it that way. So you have to accept that bias in some of my answers. But I would say that, like, actually, in terms of games played, we're halfway through the season. Got double game week's going to be springing up suddenly and stuff. And if you're more engaged than others, you're going to do well. I genuinely think it's simple as that. So I don't think that moment has arrived yet where I'm sitting here thinking, I know the right things to roll this week, but yeah, fuck it, Hail Mary, I'm going to buy Mbumo this week because he's got 2 fixtures. Like, that sort of thing's just not on my mind at the moment. SK says, hey James, how much time would you contact Spurs? I'd personally look at Tuchel, really fancy him. I want Roberto De Zerbi, as probably many of you would have gathered from yesterday. My take on Conte would be, let him see out the season, and if he proves with this squad that he can do what he did at the end of last season, then yeah, buy proper players in the summer, add to it, offer him the year extension, and go again for another year. If he doesn't, and he wants to cry about it, or he wants to walk out, that's fine. But my genuine opinion right now is Tottenham shouldn't give him any money to spend, because we're moving too far towards an Antonio Conte team. If he's not going to stay, there's no point. And he's got a better squad than he had at this stage last season, with the additions of Richarlison, Bentancur, Kulusevski, Clement Longley, Ivan Perisic. And Tottenham haven't lost anyone from the team that he took brilliantly into top 4 last year, other than Harry Winks and Reguilon on loan, basically. That's all he's lost. So get back, get on the front foot, start trying to win games of football in the first half rather than the second half. Tottenham are top for second half in games this season, by the way. 12th from first half. Only 3 teams conceded more first half goals than Tottenham this season. And yet we're one of the best defensive in second half of games when we're actually chasing the game. So the more open we are, the better we are defensively. Mad, isn't it? He's got to take a lot of the blame for what's going on at the moment, because we know that he's a really good, strict, tactical, disciplined coach, and yet Tottenham were conceding way too many goals. So how did he manage to get through the end of last season with like Davinson Sanchez playing regularly and keep a number of clean sheets, Ben Davies playing regularly? How did he manage it? How did he manage it with Emerson and Sessegnon as the wing backs? I'm saying the team's worse now than it was then, and the team looked like it was onto something at the end of last season. So I think the team probably shouldn't be properly judged until Bentancur and Kulusevski are fully fit and playing regularly, because that seems to be the difference maker. And obviously it's worth saying Son's had an alarming dip this season, but I think a lot of that is like the space behind has just gone for him because Kane's not dropping deep as much. I wouldn't say, the thing is, and I'll talk about this more on Tottenham on Patreon tomorrow, it's like if you criticise Conte, it's like you're pro Levy, and if you criticise Levy, it's like you're pro Conte being manager forever. No, they all deserve criticism for what's going on. In terms of on the pitch, Conte has to get criticised a lot for what's happening at the moment. I don't think sacking him's right, though. Like, I don't think it's at that stage. And I just think Tottenham probably need to align themselves, and then if it's going to be right, we're going to go in separate ways, fine. Work to the benefit of everybody to either try and get top 4 or win the FA Cup this year. And then if Conte goes and he's got us still in the Champions League, he thinks he can't take it no further, he's won the trophy, fine, he's done his job, off you go. And then but right now, if the quality of the football doesn't improve, the results won't improve. Simple as that. And that is on nobody other than the manager. But they haven't backed him. Listen, you were all loving the business that Tottenham did in the transfer window last year. And I've just told you the team is much stronger in terms of personnel than it was this time last year. So actually that's on the manager. So, but no, I wouldn't sack him. And I think Thomas Tuchel's dancing around the same circles. Tottenham need to get a hungry, up-and-coming coach. Someone in the mould like Roberto De Zerbi. It's given me vibes like when Tottenham got Pochettino from Southampton. And I also think, by the way, and I've said this a number of times, going back to Pochettino, I think would be a massive, massive mistake. I really, really do. Because Moussa Dembele no longer plays for Tottenham. Holler Stamos says, hello, James. What do you think about Perisic so far in a Spurs shirt? It wasn't fit at the start, so he didn't have a pre-season. That didn't help. Then it took him a while to get in, but I think I've seen gradual improvements. Very clever and experienced player. Just a shame we didn't get him 4 or 5 years ago, to be honest, because the work that he's been asked to do at his age is ridiculous. I don't know if Antonio Conte can see that with his age sometimes, but yeah, I really like Ivan. I've got nothing dislikable about him. I like Ivan. He's a good player. I've really, really liked him as a footballer for a long time, long before he joined Tottenham. I think during the Euros, obviously not this summer, the tournament, the Euros that were in 2021 that should have been 2020. I said during that tournament that I thought he was one of the most underrated footballers in the world of the previous decade in terms of what he'd achieved and how good he was as a footballer and his flexibility and in terms of positional and stuff. Really top player, good in the air, good with his feet. He's got an amazing lollipop step over, 2-footed. Really good footballer. Just a little bit late in his career, that's all. George says, is Mount an urgent sell? Listen to the pod yesterday and can really understand the advantage of rolling the transfer. You answered your own question, George. Thank you. Janega77 says, hey, good week for me. Just got Mitoma for the vibes, even if it leads to a -4 down the line. Couldn't resist. Love watching them. Would you move Ericsson to Oddie now or in 23? If double happens, I might wait. Yeah, I'll repeat what I said earlier, mate, that the double might happen and you might not have the announcement for the weekend. You're going to hear a lot about that, especially on Twitter over the next few days. You know, if there's no announcement on Thursday, it's going to get to Friday. Is it going to be an announcement today? Probably not. Probably not. If it's going to be this week, I think it'll be Thursday. Daniel Cullerton says, if Gazzaniga was still at Spurs, would Lloris be out the team now? No, he was fucking abysmal. I'd say Forster's better than Gazzaniga. Like, he's toilet. It's terrible, mate. Tottenham will fix the Lloris situation in the summer. Glenn Murray says, are Arsenal the next pile-on for Sky Fantasy Football? Yeah, they might be. They might be. Entry point, I've not got the Sky schedule in front of me. But I feel like entry points are quite difficult, and in theory it would probably be this Sunday. But yeah, you could certainly make a case for it. Particularly, although you won't have the information this Sunday. You'd say arguably, particularly if they lose to Man City in the Cup. And you know the Palace game is going to happen as well. Arguably, yes. Football chat box. Good day, James. Hope you're having a great day. Yeah, not too bad. Thanks, mate. Jaron Lee says, assuming price is no issue, Saka versus Odegaard, sell Martinelli. Here's the thing. Here's my take on this. So, it might not be an issue now, Saka Odegaard price, but it might be further down the line, and therefore the answer's Odegaard. Like, do I think Saka outscores Odegaard? Yeah, probably. Probably. But I think it's dangerous to say price no issue. Sure, price no issue, you can buy Saka. But if you buy Odegaard, you've got that money you can use for something else at some stage. And I can almost bet with certainty you go for Saka, there'll be a point down the line you're going, yeah, it was close enough. I probably should have gone with a cheaper one. And that's my take at the moment. Because if I downgrade Cancelo in 22, I'll have that as a decision. And I could potentially buy Saka rather than Odegaard. It'll be Odegaard for me. Jordan Harrison says, hi James, have you got any opinion on Stoke City's owners? We used to be such a well-run club, it seems, but has been ran into appallingly for the last 5-6 years, and we could easily go down this year. I don't know enough about what's happening behind the scenes there with the Coates family and Bet365. I do know that the lady in charge of Bet365, wasn't their bonus like 200 million or maybe it was 20 million. I know it was an absurd amount of money for a bonus, and it's been that way for 2 consecutive years. And you think, where do you think Stoke could use that? So I do you know what? It's something I'd like to investigate actually, Jordan. The relationship between Bet365 and Stoke, and how close the ties and the involvement are there on that. So yeah, good prompt, good question, Jordan. GM Stores says, yes, James, can you please try and tell me what's going on at Liverpool? I reckon we should get rid of Klopp. You should have seen how he set us up on Saturday. I'm more than annoyed now. I reckon he should leave. I saw how he set you up on Saturday, mate. And I also spoke yesterday at length on the podcast about what I think he should do. He probably won't do it. Jurgen Klopp's currently part of the problem, but he should change that Liverpool play deeper. And for me, if Liverpool drop 10 yards off, stop pressing, and try and become a possession-based team over the next 3-4 months, they'll finish top 4. But I know that he probably won't. He won't look at the short-term game for the long-term game, I don't think. They need a rebuild, clearly. He's part of the current problem, but sacking him is not... That's not right, mate. He says he won't walk. Why would he walk? Why would he walk? I think you'll find that you'd be in a minority amongst Liverpool fans in terms of wanting him to go. Jurgen Klopp is the best thing to happen to Liverpool in the last 30 years. And there's no doubt about that. And that has to have an element of grace. Jurgen Klopp hasn't become a bad manager overnight. Things have happened this year that are partly his fault. No doubt, like with Conte, he's got to take some responsibility. I highly recommend listening back to what I said on the podcast yesterday. I referenced the win against Manchester City, for example. There's a simple, easy fix here in the short term, but that might not help Liverpool in the long term. And I think he'll think further ahead. So honestly, sacking Jurgen Klopp is not the answer for me. Even if Liverpool finished 7th this year, I think go again next season and try. Maestri18 says, hi James, the content this last week has been absolutely brilliant. Cheers, you're very welcome, thank you. Ethan Hood says, hi James, how do you feel about the prospects of Kane leaving Spurs this summer for a fee? Hearing whispers today he's not interested in signing a new contract. I discussed this at the end of the deadline stream on Friday night. We was talking about the prospect of him going to Manchester United possibly. And I to be honest, in summary, I said that I thought unless the offer was from abroad, that Tottenham would take the decision to would take the chance that Kane would go on a free the next year, to be honest, rather than sell him to a rival. You have to consider that the fans at the football club want change, a large majority of them now, and you sell the crown jewel, Harry Kane. Whereas almost if you leave it to the end, you say, we did everything we could to try and keep him. I mean, what's that even worth to Tottenham anyway? Let's say, with a year left on his contract, let's say United offer 100 million, hypothetically. But Tottenham decide to keep him for a year. If Tottenham keep him for that year and Tottenham get back in the Champions League, rather than not get in the Champions League and take the money, then to be honest, the vast sums of that tournament remedy and mean that actually Tottenham would be better off keeping him and possibly letting him leave on a free. Reality. Now that's not to say that he and United would maybe not force the move. I think Sir Alex Ferguson would tell you that Daniel Levy is the worst person in the world to try and deal with. He just stopped answering the phone to Manchester City. And when Tottenham played Man City on the opening day of the season last season, they were too frightened by all accounts to speak to Levy. That was the reports. So yeah, that Daniel said one strength for Daniel is obviously a very tough negotiator. So, I mean, is it a possibility? Yeah, and I've also spoke and said that I think Tottenham should really consider taking that money and moving on and rebuilding. And the best thing for Harry Kane and his career, the way it looks at the moment would be to leave. And I can't argue that. Those who've listened to me a long time will know that I said when we went into the COVID period, like, he has to leave. He has to leave. The year before the Man City debacle, I said he's got to leave now. This is such a mess. So I'd no blame for Harry Kane if he goes. Absolutely none. Chisborn says, hi James, tried this question last stream. As a fellow Spurs fan, I'm hurting. Who do you want as a coach at the start of next season? Stick or kick Conte? Roberto De Zerbi, mate. Yeah, I've fallen in love with that idea. So I listened to yesterday's podcast again, or listen to Tottenham on Patreon tomorrow. Chisborn also says, at the moment, sub 40k rank. Very good. We've only one hit so far. Rank's so tight that every point matter. Taking a hit has to at least level out at a minimum. Best thing I've done this season is take it real easy. Sure, and that's cool. But there'll be plenty out there who... I saw Raptor was... Ross obviously shared a tweet from one of his hits, and I don't think it was from this season. I think it was from last season. It was like a 30-point hit or something, and it worked out for him. It was crazy. And he made big gains on it. So some people will argue the other way and say, look, my aggressiveness... There will be someone near a rank with you who's used 40-point hits or something, been really aggressive and got similar, honestly. Sir Khalid says, FPL League is closed, mate. It closes at the end of September. So people don't join in late. Sorry about that. JT says, anyone else going to love it when Kane leaves Spurs? Yeah, you, by the sounds of it. All right, we've done an hour. I can see my mate Andy's back in. So he says, cheers for answering. Had to hang the washing up and only just listened. You're very welcome, Andy. No problem as always. I'll give Sean this one. Says, great work as always, James. Start Saliba or Dalot, assuming he's back. And do you think Lewis will start on Thursday? Start Saliba with the home fixture. And no, I think Kyle Walker against Son will play again. And I was quite strong-minded in saying that I thought Kyle Walker, because of Rashford and Son, will play the two games. And a lot of people were against that. And I just logically, I couldn't look beyond Walker versus Rashford and Son. Not that I think he's been playing well, Kyle Walker. But I think, yes, he'll play against Son. Against Wolves, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Rico Lewis. That would be my take right now. Right, we'll leave it there, guys. Thanks very much. Sorry to those I haven't got to on the questions. But feel free to tag me publicly on Twitter, and I'll happily answer your question a little later today. But thank you very much for those who joined in on the stream. Smash a like on your way out. And for the benefit of those on the podcast, cue music, please, man child.